This video is about the attempted repair of a Sony Handycam that plays Hi8 tapes. It has a viewfinder problem and we'll try to repair that. However, you may ask yourself, what is the wisdom of trying to repair something that is effectively 35 years old? For me, it's the ability to play back Hi8 tapes and transfer them to the computer. It is beginning to develop other problems, but then will have to be addressed at some time in the future. But before we go any further, there was something that was a complete, total success for me, and that was making a soldering iron tip to desolder SMD resistors, and I'd like to share that with you. So rather than thumb through the rest of the video to find it, here's the clip of it now. I think it's pretty self-explanatory how to make one, so I don't offer any details on that, and it worked really well for me. For good measure, put a drop more flux on the one that still is remaining. I'll do much the same as I did before. I'll just hold it. And that's off. Hopefully you may find that useful at some time in the future. Now you can sit back and watch the rest of this video, or alternatively find something else more to your liking. Today I'm trying to fix a Sony Handycam. It's got a viewfinder problem. It's a CRT little Cathode Ray Tube viewfinder, black and white, and there's a raster problem on there. I'll try and get a photograph of the CRT for you, but I'm going to remove the lens, the eyepiece first. The whole assembly is only held together by 3 screws. It's very much a tabletop exercise, this one, because I'm a bit pushed for time. I'm not at home, and I won't be able to fix it, but I just want to have a little look and see what's going on. One of the first things is I've got it on a power unit, and I better remove it from that before I go any further. I'll put it back on in a minute. Let's get it off there. Move that over to one side. Now, when you take these things apart, you don't really want any power on them because they're relatively high voltages that drive the tube. I'm not sure, but back in the old days, CRTs, it was in the thousands of volts. I'm not sure what this needs to drive it. Now, that's one little screw taken out, and this should just pop off, I think. Right, put that over to one side. Now, I'll put it on a little pad serving plate, laptop serving plate, because it's got ridges running around the outside. I've got titchy little screws, and don't want to come a cropper losing any of them. Now, I'm going to put this back onto its power unit. That don't work. Let's see if that fits in there now. Right, I'll switch on. I think you can probably see what the problem is. I'll just run me, well, there's no point running my hands in front of it because it's a tape, but you can see what the problem is. There's also a rather nasty smell starting to come out of here, as if something is ionising through arcing on something. So I won't leave it on too long, I'll switch it off. There's 2 more screws I'm going to take out there and there, and you sort of sorry if they're going quiet, but I'm not hoping that I'll ever be able to fix it, but I could at least have a try. And even if I don't fix it, nothing's lost, because all I do is use this for recovering tapes. And, I can dispense with a viewfinder really, but I just don't like the idea of it smelling. Right, now let's see if we can pop it apart. And see what happens. Right, here we go. I hope I ain't broke anything. Now, there's a very small little piece down here that you can lose. It's sort of like a limit rubber that fits in these sliders. This thing rotates, and I'll just take it off and put it on the table, and see if we can focus in on these screws for you. Well, there it is there, little titchy thing, and can be a bit, you know, you don't want to put this back on without that being in place. Alright, let's crack on. Well, here's what we're looking at. I've got to get this out, and let's see, I think we can get hold of the back part of that. I just pull it out. Right. Right. And the board is just sort of clipped in. There's a connector on the other end of it. That's it. All that's holding that in is there's a little connector that goes on to another board that's inside here. Now, this is the thing that's smelling quite a bit, and quick examination of the back of it. Let's see if we can zoom in and show you what I mean. There's a guy by the name of 12 Volt Vids that does excellent repair videos, and lots of them, and got bags of experience. He had a similar problem, and he narrowed it down to this little capacitor here, and as you can see, the area around here is quite sort of a bit frayed, and, a bit burnt. There's a little bit of burn at the end of this resistor here, but these are the legs of the capacitor that I'm going to remove and test. I'm under a fair bit of duress today. The TV's blaring in the other room, everybody's rushing about, and so any ideas of keeping quiet is going to be difficult. And I'd like to point out that that's the little capacitor I just took out, and this one of those cheap little multi-function testers, and I can tell you that capacitor's gone because it's leaking like mad. Hopefully you can read that, guys, and what it says is it's a capacitor. It's 62.4 microfarads. 15 kilo ohms for the ESR, well, that's stupid. And whatever VL stands for, VI loss is 20%. So it's, that capacitor is collapsed. Let's do it again.
Because we have to go back to 1748 for the first mention of the sovereign's birthday being honoured with a military display.
There you go. Still says 15k, 61, losses 19%. So that needs to be changed. I'm going to measure that up and get a replacement. It's 82 microfarads, 10 volts working, and it says 105 on here somewhere, degrees centigrade maximum working temperature. What I'm going to do is clean up the muck on this PCB, and look at that tiny resistor there. There's just a little bit of charring at one end of it. Just using a bit of methylated spirits on a small piece of cloth to clean this area up. It's looking a lot better already. Probably rub the component values off, no more luck.
Mom, just come in.
See what I mean? Right, that's about as good as it can be. It seems strange to me, this little CRT, which has quite high voltages. They accelerate the electrons up to smash against the front screen there. Considering the high voltages generated and the electrons that are beamed towards the front, that we stick our eye right up to it to look at it. Now I've got to put all this away for a few days until I get some new capacitors come in, so we're all in there watching Her Majesty.
It's clear, it's sunny, colours are dazzling, the details remarkable.
Not that I don't want to be in there with him, but I've got to get this cleared out of the way, because this is our dining room table. Well, don't want to lose my screws. That's true.
I wondered if there's any more information on it, but there isn't.
And what I do is I put my screws slightly into where they come out of, so that I don't lose them. I'll put things over to one side. I managed to get a capacitor to replace this one. Unfortunately, this is 100 microfarad and this is 82 microfarad. I would have had to have probably bought these in quantity, and I just wanted one. Couldn't find any source for it, so I settled on 100 microfarad, 10 volt working. It's a very tight space to fit, and the height of the package is critical. And I'll come to that point in a minute as to why it failed. When I took this apart, these two resistors were covered in gunk, probably from the capacitor, and this one started to carbonise around it, so I cleaned it all off. These two resistors are 2.7 megohms each, and they're both in series. Now, I have had a problem in the past with this sort of arrangement. there's two reasons that I can think of that they would put them in series. One is to get the value they want, and two is to increase the working voltage of the device. These are 150 volts each, maximum working, and by having them in series you could put 300 volts across them. And we'll have a look at the circuit diagram and explain why that isn't the case. Rather than carry on, I'm just going to solder my new capacitor in place. Hope that these are not damaged, although I have a feeling that they may be going well out of spec, and if they are I'll have to change them, but I don't want to. As I got the fault diagnosis from another video, link in the description, it appears that this capacitor is a common failure. And perhaps the reason behind it is that the heaters for this little CRT tube that's in here, Cathode Ray Tube, are there, and that will be the hottest part of the tube, and it's directly above the electrolytic capacitor, and I think that's assisting in the premature failure of that device. We'll look at the circuit diagram and I'll explain about the two resistors that are in series on the other side of the board. Little titchy ones there and there. I've just cleaned the flux off. However, the board all over is coated in a sort of a varnish, which means the integrity of the varnish over the parts I've soldered is probably disrupted. Whether it's going to make any difference or not, I don't know. The question is why did they do that? I presume it's to protect the board from tarnishing, oxidation, etc. Well, the time's come to put the unit back in the camera, and there's a little connector, and perhaps you can see it there. So I should imagine these are going to pop in and out of focus as I do this, so I won't add any more comment. not easy. There we go, that's CRT's in place. Come down with the board, and that's clicked into place. Now I've got to put the covers on. I'd like to test it first without putting the top cover on, just in case I've got to take it all out again. And just in case there's anything that's sort of smouldering, I'd like to observe what's going on. Now this is probably not what one would expect, but if I run my hand in front of it, you can see, probably see my finger, and it's as if half the, or 3/4 of the screen is blanked out. And this thing's got another problem. There's two resistors in there that were a bit charred, and I'm going to replace them. But before I do that, I'll explain what I think is going on using a circuit diagram. This is the circuit diagram for the Viewfinder, and here's the electrolytic capacitor that we replaced, and as you can see, it goes off to the scan coils of the CRT display, and it did cure the particular issue with that. However, it didn't cure everything, and something else has gone wrong. And on the board, visual inspection, and on the board, there was a resistor that had a fair bit of carbonised crud around it, and it was one of these two resistors here, R62, R63. They're both in series. The main reason one would do this is to increase the working voltage of the resistor chain here, in that each device is capable of dealing with about 150 volts max working. By doing the two in series, we get increase that range to 300 volts working. And I presume, looking at the value of the capacitor that we've got here, which is a 500 volt working capacitor, and it's connected to one end of them, that we are dealing with voltages that are quite elevated and need this higher working voltage. Now, whether it cures the problem or not, I wouldn't like to say, because it may or it may not. And I have a bee in my bonnet because I've had problems with this technique used on a CRT display before, and I'm going to change them because of it. Because what happens is, if the tolerances go out, you will find that they act as a potential divider. One resistor then gets more voltage across it than it should do, and that breaks down, and hey presto, you end up with a problem. If I hadn't had that problem years ago, I probably wouldn't even be thinking about replacing them. Now, changing these resistors is well outside of my skill set, and I'm quite elderly. My vision is not as good as it could be, but I'm not letting that stop me. If I want to play about with more modern equipment, then I've got to really up my game when it comes to soldering, and that's what I'm going to try and do. If it all fails, nothing is lost. I'll just disconnect the viewfinder and carry on using the camcorder for what I use it for, which is transferring Hi8 tapes to another digital medium. If you're wondering what those two resistors do, they're part of the brightness control. They go to one side of it goes to the control grid G2. The other side goes away to a little potentiometer via the connector, on the other part of the board. It goes in on A, RV903, and they all come back out and go down to round about this part of the circuit. So we'll see what happens. I'm not holding out any big hope for any of this, but if we're lucky, we're lucky. I'm going to attempt to remove these two resistors. For real, I'm just putting a little bit of flux on both of them. Got a pair of tweezers and my homemade soldering iron bit. No, it's not going to work. So let me see if I can just hold it there. Get it off like this. Right, well, it's off. Ah, blimey, it's hot. There's a little black speck. I've got to solder a new one of those into position. Could have said I'm going to do that. I'm going to come back out here. For good measure, put a drop more flux on the one that still is remaining. I'll do much the same as I did before. I'll just hold it. And that's off. Okay. Well, the bit that I made to remove these things worked a treat. In fact, it did what I expected it to do. Now I've got to let my soldering iron cool down while I change the bit again, because I want to clean up the pads. Now I put some more flux on and put a different bit on my soldering iron. Let's see if we can clean up the pads. One thing for sure, it's moving around. Nothing I can do about that. Just see if I can chin the pads. Something odd about that one. More flux. Put some flux on my shoulder wick. Let's see if we can get all that off. Now I've tinned it with lead-based solder because it's got a lower melting temperature, and when it comes round to soldering it tends to flow a bit better than the lead-free. I think that's it. Just have a quick look. Moderately okay. Could do a little clean up now. We'll give it a clean up and see what it looks like. Two bits of bad news. The resistors both tested okay, so they've not broken down, and so replacing them is not going to cure the fault. However, the second bit of bad news is that some of the black crud I can still see a layer between this pad on that side, and I'm going to clean all that off and to check to see whether it's shortening down to an earth plane or anything like that, because you know, providing a sort of a lower sort of a resistive path that shouldn't be there. I'll do that off camera because it's so very awkward. That's it for now. Although I'm going to try and photograph the next bit, putting a little thing in place. I'll chin my soldering iron. My hands are probably going to get in the way. Well, I've tucked it into place, and that in itself is quite a miracle because I did that left-handed. Right, I don't know what's going on, so I'm really going to have to do glasses, and trying to film this at the same time is not impossible. Well, that's awful. I admire people who can do this, because I obviously can't. Well, I could carry on doing that all day. Let's see if we've done it, if with a magnifying glass. Sad as it is, it's an appalling piece of soldering for my first attempt, and there wasn't anything wrong with the resistors that I took off, so I'm not expecting anything different. And I won't be taking this repair any further because I just want to get the job done of copying some tapes across, and it's all a little bit pointless really. If it stops the burning smell that we were getting and cures that, then it's done its job. I'm pleased to say we got rid of the smell of the burning, and I was able to transfer my Hi8 tapes. One problem that is apparent is that electrolytics tend to go leaky in items of this age, and I need to strip the whole camera down into its component parts and then check it over completely. For this I need a workbench, somewhere where I can leave it for a few weeks, and sadly I'm lacking that space at present. The project will have to be shelved until some future date. I hope you found something useful in the video, and perhaps we'll see you again another day.